Okay, so today is a little bit of a story about a guy named Charles Darwin. We get that on here, Darwin. And he was a British naturalist, a biologist, and geologist in the 1800s. And he is best known for his ideas on what we know of as evolution. Good morning, everybody. This is, at the time of the taping of this, is Easter, or Easter weekend. So I thought it would be a perfect time to do this. I want to talk to you a little bit about religion, and the religion in the way that we know of it, and cultural development. Because, as we talked about in the previous lecture, religion is culture. Like a lot of our cultures are based around religious issues, not just religion, but a lot of them traditionally. So I have a couple different things that I want to talk about, but I'm going to start with the story of Abraham, and this format is normally probably 2 or 3 class lectures. So I'm going to try and do the quick one in like just a couple of minutes. I may have to do some other videos as well to sort of supplement it, but yeah, I'm going to try my best to do this in a couple of minutes. Okay, so in modern day Iraq, down near the bottom of Iraq, the southern part, there's an ancient, one of our very first civilizations was called Sumer. And Sumer is no longer there, but it's called modern day Iraq now. But from this area, we see this guy, his name is Abraham. His name, actually, it's Ibrahim, but we call him Abraham. And Abraham has a bunch of some followers, and at one point, he hears a voice. And the voice is of this voice of a local sort of god named Yahweh. And Yahweh says to Abraham out in the desert, he says, there is only one God and I'm him. Which is interesting because at the time, the area, and really all of the known world, was polytheistic, which polytheistic just means that there are many gods. Like when you think about the gods of Greece or the gods of Rome or whatever. But so in this area it was polytheistic as well. So for this particular God to say there's only one God, this monotheistic approach, mono meaning one, was a significant change in the way that people thought. Anyway, the story goes on. Abraham ultimately leaves the land he's from, Sumer, and heads out looking for another piece of land that Yahweh, God, has told him to go find. And this, he's promised him this land. This is known as, the promised land. You may have heard of that term before. At this point, they're sort of wandering through the desert, and the people in one of the areas see them moving, and they didn't have a name, right? So they became known as the Wanderers, right? And the word Wanderers translates to mean to be Hebrews. So if you look at number 2 here, number 2 is the Hebrews. That's who the Hebrews were, this group of wandering people following the will, the wishes of Yahweh. And they ended up in modern day Israel, which is really kind of about 750 miles wandering through essentially the desert, which is a pretty significant walk. So these Hebrew people, there's a whole story of these Hebrews, going to Egypt, etc., etc. Anyway, they end up back in the original Promised Land, and are ultimately captured by another outside group. And it's at this point that in history that the Hebrews transform historically to the people that we know as Jews. And they're called Jews because they actually come from Judea, which is part of the name of the land that they were captured in. So that's where Judaism is the religion, and Jewish is the people who follow Judaism. The God of the Jews, even in modern day, is still Yahweh, right? Now Yahweh is not exactly accurate, but for this video, it's as sort of accurate as we're going to get. There are many names for the Jewish God, Yahweh. But that's just sort of one of them. As we move forward on this through, next thousands of years, we see, in the area, Judaism has grown and people are, the followers of Yahweh Well, at one point there was a small group of Jewish men in particular, but there were some women as well, that followed this one particular man. This guy's name was Joshua ben Joseph, or Joshua ben Yosef, actually, to be more accurate. Now, why would they follow him? Well, part of being a Jew or being Jewish is this concept of waiting. You're waiting for the Messiah to come. So when the Messiah comes, the Messiah will deliver the chosen people, the Jews, to heaven. Well, a small group of people thought that this Messiah did come, and this Messiah they thought was Joshua ben Yosef. We know of him historically better as Jesus, but the Jesus is not his name. That was a Greek translation of Joshua or Jesus. And so the group of people started to follow this Messiah. Jews didn't believe in that, so the modern day Jews still are waiting for the Messiah to come, and that Jesus essentially is a non-entity with regard to their belief system. But to Christians, they follow this guy named Joshua. Now, why are they called Christians then? Well, so Joshua translates to Jesus, so you know that. Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, which means anointed one, sort of someone worthy of worshiping. So Jesus Christ is actually a title, not really not a name. His name isn't Jesus Christ. His name isn't Jesus, first of all, and his last name is not Christ, right? It's almost like Jesus the King or some version of that. All right, and then that the cultural components of Christianity move on all the way to modern day. So you have the Jewish culture, you have Christian culture. Christianity begins about 2,000 or so years ago. The Hebrews begin somewhere like 4,000-ish, more than that, maybe 4,500 years ago. Okay, so that brings us sort of quickly through the Jews and the Christians, and then that leaves us with the third of these three religions. These three religions are all known as the Abrahamic religions because they all essentially stem from this guy named Abraham. So the last link then is between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is this one Islam, and Islam is the newest of the three Abrahamic religions, and it begins around 1400 or so years ago. And there's a whole story behind it, but the God of Islam is Allah, A-L-L-A-H, Allah, and Allah is the same God as the Jews, the same God as the Christians, it's just a different name. All right, so when they're called the Abrahamic religions, it's this understanding that it's all three gods are just the same God. So they're all actually very, very closely linked. And the main prophet of Islam is a guy named Muhammad. And Muhammad is the beginning person who sort of spreads the ideas of Allah. And this occurs around, say 1400 years ago. So Muhammad is the prophet, and Allah is the God. And so the religion is called Islam. And if you worship Islam, you are a Muslim. M-U-S-L-I-M, Muslim. Right? So just to keep a quick little introduction to it, the belief systems are based on the same God. The differences come in the culture, the festivals, where the individual religion grew up. Like if you grew up in the desert, your culture is going to be different than if you grew up in a forest. So that's kind of where we need to go, I think, with this quickly, is this idea that the cultural components of these three Abrahamic religions all stem from their individual areas. And the stories, although very, very interlinked, the story of Muhammad and the story of Moses are very, very closely tied. So the more that you understand about this stuff, the more you're going to understand the nature of the world. Right? Islam is not really very different than Christianity or Judaism. There are cultural components to it that are different, but the origins and the basic belief systems are the same. All right.